Our fallen angel returned, not in chains from the abyss, not cast into emptiness, but walking calmly through heaven's pearly gates as though betrayal had never touched him. Why, and what burden did he bring, one so heavy the elders of heaven turned away their eyes? You won't find his answer in the Bible resting on your table. The approved scriptures make no mention of his tale. The well-known apocryphal texts leave only faint, shadow-like hints. Yet, in the dust-laden scrolls of early monastic hands and in the murmurs of mystics, his name still drifts like a voice from an age both heaven and hell would rather erase. His name was Namtael. He wasn't a warrior like Michael, nor a messenger like Gabriel. He belonged to another order entirely, the keepers of memory and time, those who knew all before it unfolded. He wrote down every word, every choice, even before the angels themselves understood what they had decided. It was the weight of seeing too much that pulled him down. Yet somehow, heaven let him return, not to join the choirs, not to stand before the throne, but to guard a secret bound in 7 layers of divine light, so dangerous that if it ever came to light, the very pillars of heaven would quake. If you dare, step with me beyond the veil of time. Meet Namtael, the angel of memory who fell with Lucifer, yet came back with eyes carrying the darkness of untold things. And remember, there are truths that, once uncovered, will change forever how you see the world. Before shadow ever reached heaven, before the first trumpet cried for war, Namtael was already there, not on the front lines, not in the chamber of revelation, but in a place few paid attention to, one that saw everything, the heavenly archives, where every act was inscribed, every intent weighed, every promise guarded for eternity. His name meant the scribe of God, and in heaven's tongue a name was more than a label, it was the essence of one's being. Namtael's very core was memory. He didn't just note the past, he wrote down what was still to come, the seeds of decisions, the flickers in an angel's mind before they chose their allegiance. He didn't judge or interfere. His role was to preserve so that neither light nor darkness would vanish from the record. Warrior angels like Michael bore wings of steel and eyes of fire. Messengers like Gabriel carried God's voice across creation. Namtael wore a long silver robe, its threads stitched like constellations, and in his hand, always, a pen forged from the first light of creation. He walked the endless corridors of eternity, his steps nearly silent, yet everywhere he passed, memories were fixed like stars pinned to the sky. He saw wonders beyond words, a star born in a flash of blue fire, an angel singing a song never heard before, the first human gaze opening to the world God had just spoken into life. These he etched not only in the heavenly language, but in his own heart. And that was both his gift and his flaw. Other scribes stayed detached, treating memory as cold record. Namtael felt it all. When a star died, he felt something within him fade. When an angel chose treachery, it was like a blade in his chest. When he saw humanity, fragile yet radiant, he felt a reverence many angels never grasped, for a creation imperfect yet carrying God's image. So when Lucifer's murmurs began questions of justice, fairness, freedom, Namtael didn't shut them out or condemn. He listened, not in agreement, but seeking understanding, believing even doubt belonged in the record for truth to be whole. He didn't see that standing in the middle can be a choice itself, one that drags you into the current you only meant to observe. Namtael had never smelled the blood of battle or heard swords clash in the light. He wasn't a prophet shown visions to warn others. He was only a witness, yet a witness to everything. And knowing too much can be as perilous as doing wrong. That may be why Namtael's tale stood apart, Benarisim. He didn't fight from hate, nor did he fall from pride. He fell because he carried too many memories, too many doubts, too much darkness no angel was shaped to bear. There's a kind of war without swords or trumpets, fiercer than open battle, the war inside the mind. For Namtael, it began as whispers and swelled into a storm he couldn't outrun. He was not like the other scribes who watched without touching. He held memory in his heart. He didn't just record events. He kept glances, tones of voice, the smallest tremors others ignored. Every joy and grief cut into him as his own. That made him easy ground for Lucifer's seeds. Lucifer didn't storm in with threats. He came with gentle thoughts. Have you ever wondered if all of heaven's orders can be explained? If love is freedom, why the limits? They were questions, not commands, yet in Namtael's tender spirit they rooted. He didn't run to join Lucifer. He didn't cry for God's throne to fall. But neither did he rise to defend it. He stood between, watched by both sides with suspicion. To heaven, his silence looked like betrayal, to Lucifer like hesitation. Inside, he was torn apart. He loved the Creator's justice and light, but some of Lucifer's questions brushed a nerve in his hunger to know more. He didn't want to fight God, but he couldn't act as though he'd never heard those words. His struggle became a torment. Each time he unrolled the scrolls of angelic history, the weight grew heavier. To side with heaven meant erasing certain memories, the ones holding questions without answers. To side with Lucifer meant betraying the truth he was made to guard. There were long stretches, if night could be spoken of in a realm with no sunset, when Namtael wandered the endless halls, pen in hand, the page before him blink. He couldn't write not for lack of events, but because every word was caught between two forces tearing at his mind. Have you ever been where either choice means losing something you value and standing in the middle makes you a traitor to both? That was where Namtael stood. When the rebellion broke, the trumpets echoed not only in the skies, but in every angel's soul. A third of the stars were swept away. Warriors collided like lightning in a storm. Yet for Namtael, that moment had begun long before the clash of steel or the blare of horns. It began in silence, the kind born when faith is ripped apart, when you find everything you trusted yesterday pressed to its breaking point. Namtael didn't raise his voice for rebellion, nor did he shout praises to the throne like the steadfast angels. He simply stood there, arms filled with scrolls, and fell alongside the others, not from malice, not from hunger for power, but because he couldn't choose. To some, that might look like cowardice. To him, it was heartbreak, a collapse of the heart trapped between two truths he could not deny, a collapse that would take him on a path no angel had ever walked, the path into the abyss. That day, heaven's light was no longer whole, its music no longer pure. A hairline fracture appeared, widening into a chasm that split the kingdom. Lucifer's quiet inquiries turned into an open summons, and legions bent their ears to his call. The golden halls now rang with hurried steps of those taking sides. Hands once lifted in worship now clutched swords. Eyes once warm with trust now burned with suspicion. In the middle of it all, Namtael slipped through like a shadow, holding the scrolls to his chest as though they were the last unbroken thing left to him. Lucifer gathered those who believed heaven needed a new order, one freed from the will of a single ruler. Michael stood unshaken in defense of the throne and God's holiness. These forces surged toward one another like vast waves ready to collide. At the first trumpet's blast, heaven trembled. The gates shut. Across the heights, countless warriors crashed together, their flaming swords sweeping arcs of blinding light. Stars once steady in their courses were swept into the vortex of chaos, and a third of heaven's light vanished like embers scattered into the void. Namtael lingered at the edge of battle, unable to turn away. He saw Michael's sword blaze like lightning as it tore through rebel lines. He saw Lucifer's cold gaze as he drove his loyal host straight into the final defenses. Every strike, every cry seared itself deeper into his mind, memories that in time no one else would hold in full. Yet what crushed him most was not the roar of steel or the blare of trumpets, but the eyes of old companions, angels who once worked beside him in the archives, now falling on both sides. In that chaos, he knew he belonged nowhere. To stand with Michael meant raising his blade against those he had once understood. To join Lucifer meant betraying the light and truth he had been made to guard. In the end, he moved toward neither. He let himself fall when the boundary between light and darkness shattered, not with vows or battle cries, only with a quiet surrender among the countless sparks fading out. The scriptures speak of the rebellion only in numbers, a third of the stars swept from heaven. They do not speak of what it felt like to be one of those stars as they fell. For Namtael, time itself seemed to stop. All sound vanished, leaving only a suffocating stillness, the silence not of peace, but of faith broken. He did not land in any place men have painted. There were no roaring fires of hell, no endless screens. Instead, he entered a realm without edges, without light, without time, a place where every memory warped like a shattered mirror rearranging itself. This was the abyss, where the fallen were kept not for immediate judgment, but in a prison with no escape. And when he opened his eyes in that formless dark, he knew he had stepped into a chapter no scroll had ever described. The abyss bore no likeness to human visions of hell, no seas of fire, no walls of wailing, only an endless expanse where every path led to nothing. Here, no light gave shape, no clock measured moments, eternity itself seemed frozen. Namtael saw not total blackness, but a strange opacity where outlines bled into memories, dissolving like ink in water. He tried to grasp familiar images, the golden halls, the silver pen, the glowing scrolls, but they twisted within seconds, warping, stretching, shattering into fragments, as though unseen hands were erasing and rewriting them at will. This was the essence of the abyss, memory itself unraveling. Every truth bent and shifted from moment to moment. And for an angel whose very being was to preserve memory, it was punishment far crueler than chains or fire. He wandered through the boundless void, clutching the scrolls against him. Again and again he tried to unroll them, to write what he saw, but the ink bled away, erased as though the abyss rejected the keeping of truth. Even the pen, forged from creation's first light, trembled in his grasp, no longer steady. Shadows appeared at times, some were other fallen angels, bound in chains of darkness, eyes like fading embers. Some were the Watchers, ancient ones imprisoned long before. None drew close. They observed him warily, as though he carried something even the abyss itself feared. And he did. In his arms lay the last untainted scrolls, holding the unbroken memories of the rebellion, records both heaven and hell would see destroyed if they could. He knew this was too dangerous to lose, yet too dangerous to reveal. What passed for time slipped by without measure. And Namtael began to feel it. He was being watched. Not by Lucifer, nor by any fallen, but by something older than the rebellion itself, something he had never met in all his days in heaven. It neither advanced nor spoke, yet its silence bore down on him, as if every breath he drew was being weighed and recorded. Then one day, if such a word could even apply here, Namtael saw it, a door. Not of wood or stone, but a trembling curtain in the void, its edges indistinct, the light beyond so sharp it ached to behold. He moved toward it, and just before his hand touched, a voice spoke. It was neither angel nor demon, but older than both. It issued no command, made no enticement, only one question. Why do you still carry the scroll? Namtael's lips never moved, yet the answer shaped itself within his mind, because if I do not remember the truth, no one will. In that instant, the abyss shifted. The voice began to unveil images not of the past, nor of the war he had witnessed, but of a future yet unseen by even heaven. A greater conflict, more savage than the rebellion. A time when the last betrayers would stand revealed. And in the shadow of those visions, Namtael began to write. What flowed from his pen was no common prophecy, but a record honed into a weapon. Each word became a shard of a secret able to shake heaven's foundations. This was no ordinary chronicle, it could shape the future. The scroll did not merely hold events or foretellings, it bore a weight capable of tipping the balance between light and darkness. He wrote with ink not of any material realm, each character and symbol forged from a weaving of shadow and light. It was not prophecy in the familiar sense, spoken by God to man, but the testimony of one who had seen the future from a place outside the reach of both heaven and hell. No one knew for certain what the scroll contained, yet whispers traveled through ages, passing between angels and the ancient Watchers. Some said it told of a second war in heaven, far greater than Lucifer's revolt. Others claimed it named those who would betray in the last days, not the already fallen, but those now standing in light who would cross over when the hour came. Still others whispered of something darker, that it revealed the final words God spoke to Lucifer before casting him into the abyss, a secret that made him smile even as he fell. Namtael knew whatever truth lay within, it could never reach Lucifer's grasp. Yet he also knew that left in the abyss, it would one day be found. So he made an unheard-of choice. He would return to heaven, not to plead for pardon, nor to reclaim his former place, but to deliver the scroll. He emerged from the abyss as though the path had always been there, walking straight toward the gates of heaven. The scroll in his arms was bound in chains of light, forged by his own hand from the oldest symbols. With each step, the radiance of the gates grew stronger, yet instead of repelling him, it cast into sharper view the scars of the abyss still carved into his face. The guarding seraphim, wings of flame, eyes like suns, knew him instantly. They remembered who he had been and the place he had held in the archives, but now their gaze marked him as both stranger and threat. Swords of fire rose, but Namtael did not resist. He knelt, the scroll still in his grasp. Then Michael appeared, sword still bright with the memory of ancient wars. His voice rolled like thunder. "Namtael, why have you come back?" Namtael spoke only once, "Because what I carry belongs to neither hell nor my hands." Michael, who had looked into the eyes of thousands of the fallen, paused not for the words, but for the fear he saw there. Not fear of judgment or destruction, but fear of something approaching, something that could consume even heaven if left unchecked. Namtael was brought before the throne, where the decision would weigh not only on his fate, but on the destiny of all heaven. Never had the golden halls been so hushed. Each step of his feet rang like a solemn drumbeat, and no one dared draw near. From the lines of seraphim along the path, eyes followed him, some cold, some doubtful, some touched with sorrow. None had ever seen a fallen angel escorted back through the pearly gates, and none could guess what awaited. Namtael's gaze stayed low, the scroll still bound in holy chains, his grip so tight the knuckles blanched. He carried no sword, no shield, yet the secret in his hands felt heavier than a mountain. The sanctuary doors opened. Before him shone the throne, its light unlike anything in creation, not merely shining, but piercing. For any rebel, to cross into that light was to be undone, not by fire, but by absolute holiness. Michael stood beside it, sword ready, yet his eyes no longer held the stance of a warrior about to strike, but the watchfulness of one weighing matters far beyond war. He had seen traitors attempt to return before, but never one like Namtael, who sought no absolution, asked no rank, only to surrender a burden. Michael's voice was steady and deep. "You know what will happen if you set foot in this place. No one who has fallen can stand before the throne and remain, unless the one seated upon it allows." Namtael lifted his head, and in his eyes there was no pride, no fear for himself, only an urgency so deep words could barely contain it. "I know," he said, "but if what I carry is not placed into his hands, it will destroy everything." Michael gave no reply. He turned, motioning for Namtael to follow. 2 more doors opened into the innermost chamber, a place so few had entered that even among the highest angels it was spoken of only in whispers. As Namtael stepped inside, the light closed around him, searching through every strand of his memory, from the first moment he had taken up the pen in the archives to the instant he plunged into the abyss. Nothing was hidden. Yet he was not consumed. The light did not burn him away. It seemed to listen. Kneeling, Namtael placed the scroll before the throne. His voice was quiet but steady. "This was never meant to be known, but I cannot allow it to be lost." He left the seal intact. Only the one on the throne could break the chains and reveal its words. As the holy radiance poured over the scroll, all of heaven fell silent. Even the elders, who had witnessed countless ages, turned away, as if to see would be to bear knowledge too heavy to endure. They say heaven's skies remained silent for 7 days, no songs, no trumpets, no marching steps, only stillness. When the light of the throne withdrew, the verdict came: Namtael would stay, but not as a scribe, not among the choirs, not near the throne. He would dwell on the outer edge of heaven, where light meets the border of the void, watching and recording until the appointed hour arrived. The scroll was sealed with 7 divine seals, hidden in a chamber no light touched, guarded by an angel whose name was known only to the one who sits upon the throne. From that day on, Namtael no longer walked the golden streets. He lived at the threshold, where radiance fades into shadow and the kingdom's last walls meet the mist of the void. No one called him a hero. No songs rose for him. No titles were restored. There was only silence and a duty no one else would bear. His role was not to fight or to judge, but to bear witness, quietly watching, writing, and waiting for the day the scroll must be opened. He knew that day would come, but it had not yet arrived, and until the final trumpet sounded, he would keep his vow of silence. At times, he looked back toward heaven, remembering when he was part of the scribe's circle, when he saw the birth of stars and recorded the first promises made to humanity. Other times, if night could be said to exist here, he gazed toward the earth, following the stories of men. He saw both light and shadow in their hearts, and sometimes the light shone brighter than anything he had known in heaven. Yet whenever chaos swelled, when wars broke out or a soul turned from truth, the question stirred inside him, is it time? He wondered if one of the faces he saw was written in the sealed scroll, if the final betrayer of heaven, the one foretold, walked the earth now or still stood among the ranks of light. Heaven rests upon truth, but the truth he bore was too dangerous to speak. Revealed too soon, it could ignite a war that would devour half of creation before its hour. So heaven chose silence, and Namtael embraced it as a vow. Imagine holding a secret that could shake the order of the universe, yet being bound to guard it until your last breath. Each time he met an angel, the thought echoed, "Is it you?" Each time he saw a human drift into darkness, he wondered, "Is this the sign?" But God's answer was always the same, "Not yet." Namtael was not a warrior or a judge. He was a witness to what is yet to come. And when the final trumpet sounds, he will deliver the secret, not with the roar of armies, but perhaps in a whisper. Perhaps God chose him because of where he had been, because he had touched the darkness, been swallowed by it, walked through fire and silence, and returned. Perhaps only such a one could recognize when that same darkness rises again. Until then, Namtael remains where heaven's light brushes the border of the void, eyes fixed on both heaven and earth, waiting for the moment when silence will be broken. And when that day comes, the secret will cease to be hidden, it will become a command, and the world will never be the same. This is the story of Namtael, the angel of memory, who fell with Lucifer yet returned carrying a truth that could shake all of heaven. The scroll remains sealed, and until the day it is opened, we live in the stillness between warning and revelation. In this time, what matters most is not the secret he guards, but how we live, how we choose, and how we stand in the light. For heaven is still watching, and sometimes, even an angel from the abyss may be watching you. If you wish to continue uncovering the hidden mysteries within the scriptures, join Black Faith Tales, for there is still much left untold.